Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Luce, the guy he's technically to my left. You guys are watching. I guess he's technically to my right. Nonetheless, this is the Juice Man himself. Before we get into all things baseball, my friend Juice, it's been a while, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Not as good as the Cubs been lately, though. So that's good to see. I do want to pat myself on the back just a little bit and say that I was the one who said, like, look at the schedule. It's getting really easy. The last time I was I think it was on a show with Tyler, or I was on a show with you. I think I had sat on there and said, yeah, man, like this is going to be totally Cubs. They're going to find a way to keep you interested all the way to the end. And they are. They're one game under 500. Yeah, the competition hasn't been the best. But hey, you got to win the games that are in front of you.
Absolutely. You got to win what you got to win. And obviously, everybody's going to play bad teams at different times in the year. I was looking at something on that note, Juice. Speaking of just like the Cubs playing good teams all season, you know how in the standings on MLB.com they show like your record against teams over 500, and most teams in the NL are somewhere in like one number's typically in the 30s and one's in like the 20s. Sometimes it's a little bit either way, right? The Cubs are the only team at least in the NL, that both of those numbers are in the 40s. They've played a lot of teams above 500 so far this year.
Uh-huh.
And they're only 3 games below 500 against those teams. They're 41 and 44. So they've held their own against very good baseball teams. It's been the stupid, blown saves like we were talking about a little bit just before we went live. It's been a lot of those things that have really been killing them this year. But Juice, I'm right there with you, buddy. 8-2 in their last 10 and on a 4-game win streak. Cubs are hot, and they're only 3 games back of the NL wild card. Before we get into our discussion, Juice, and we keep this thing moving, a couple of comments here. My dad chiming in. He says, "Crack them. We have a sweep. I'll crack them with a Stanley, and we'll
a little bit of water."
Yeah, a little bit of H2O. It's a Sunday night. We can't get too crazy here on the airwaves. And as my dad followed that up, he says the Brooms came out to play. They sure did, and we like when the Brooms come out. 2-game sweep over the Chicago White Sox, a season sweep over the Chicago White Sox. All 4 games taken by the Cubs. In addition to that, Juice, we almost had all 4 games end with the same score.
Yeah.
They got 3/4 of the way there.
And there was one hell of a fight out there in the bleacher concourse, which is going semi-viral. I don't know if you saw that.
I have not.
White Sox on Twitter. A lot of punches being thrown. I've said this, and I want to allude to it. It's my least favorite series in all of sports. And that's like, and I have Chicago Bears season tickets. I've sat next to Green Bay Packer fans. I don't like them. I don't like Green Bay, but they're delightful people. They're very nice. They really are. They come in, they're like, "Oh, Soldier Field is so cool. It's so iconic." And I'm like, I want to be mean to you. Like, just tell me I'm a dick or something. Like,
yeah, tell me Italian beef is gross. Like,
yeah, like but I find myself like telling them where the quickest bathrooms are in the stadium, opposed to pointing them in the wrong direction. I try to tell them what the best concession is. And I don't know, a couple of times I've gotten beer bought for me by Packer fans, but I'll say this, like the White Sox series, I've been once, I will never go again, ever again. I went a couple years ago in, the Cubs were awful. The White Sox were like that up and coming team with Luis Robert, and that 100% starts to flounder, but I will never go back because I will say, like, just the atmosphere is just sucks. It really does sucks. It sucks. I mean, the people like yelling at each other. It's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Just not fun. So, yeah, we'll. I don't know.
I feel that.
It doesn't surprise me that punches were thrown in the outfit.
It doesn't at all. I went, Katie and I actually went down for games on the South Side for the first time because I was at the game, Juice, if you remember when Andrew Romine hit the grand slam off Craig Kimbrell. So I was at that game. So I've been to quite a few Sox versus Cubs on the north side, and those are a lot more tame in terms of Cubs Sox. Those are the much more tame versions of the game from what I can experience. The rivalry definitely boils over on the south side. That's when you get people getting into arguments. That's when fights break out. Last year, I mean, we remember what happened with our good friend of the program, my guy. He had to go to the freaking hospital because some knuckleheads beat him up. Like I've been once, like you said, Juice, and I have no need to ever go back ever again. But it's nice when the Cubs go in there and take care of business and get W's. That makes me happy.
That's
So
all we'll take. I mean, at the end of the day, you could call them free spaces on the bingo card, but you have to make sure you're putting your little chip down, right? I mean, if you don't, then it's not a bingo. But I mean, I don't know. I get along very well with White Sox fans. And what I'll say too is, like, I went back and forth on Twitter over the weekend with our good friend Patrick Comiskey, huge White Sox fan. And both of us were saying, like, this series just doesn't have any juice anymore.
It doesn't.
And like, I kind of proposed, like, what if you did it every other year? I know for the White Sox, they would never agree to it because they sell out the stadium and Jerry loves when the stadium's full. But I mean, it would totally bring back more excitement of, like, it just feels played out now. Like it's like, oh, the crosstown cup and we're fight. It's just not that anymore. Like, there's just no, and I always thought it was more kind of fan driven than it was player driven. You know, it's a lot of like battle for the city stuff. Like, at the end of the day, I think more players would probably say they hate Milwaukee or they hate, you know, the Cardinals more often or more, or like the players feel more of a rivalry with those guys because they're battling for the same NL Central trophy. But I'll say, like, they got to do something to make this thing more interesting. And like your dad brings up a good point here, you know, that the White Sox it's because the Sox aren't competitive. The Sox aren't going to be competitive for a little while either. So, I mean, it's like this thing is not going to get better in the next couple of years either, because they're kind of pushing everything out for this total rebuild. Seems like, you know, next year they're going to be pretty abysmal too. So they got to figure something out.
I think that's the biggest thing, Juice, when it comes to the Cubs Sox series. I think the years that it's the most fun is when both teams are good, right? Like, I think back to the those like the 08 teams, right? In 08, the crosstown was fun. Those games actually meant something to both teams who were in a competitive race for their respective divisions. So those games carried a lot more weight. And I think when it does that, it makes it a lot more fun. I will say, like, last year's Cubs games down the stretch when they played them, because it was late in the season, like, for the Cubs, it meant something. So, like, as a Cubs fan, I was like, okay, cool. Like, you get meaningful wins against the other team in town. But like you said, when the other team has nothing to play for, and obviously this year is a complete just clusterfuck compared to the White Sox of yesteryear, right? Like, at least in 2023, they were somewhat respectable, you know, in terms of a roster and things like that. It's just gotten worse progressively.
Believe it or not, you say that, they still lost 101 games last year.
Oh, I know. No,
crazy. Like, this is, I don't think baseball fans who are like Chicago Cubs fans realize how bad they are. Because, for the most part, most of the Cubs fans who I talk to are like, I watch Cub games. I don't really pay attention much to the White Sox. Like, the White Sox are so, like, that's so impressive. Like, you have to try to be that bad.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't think that's getting it. I don't think it's nationally gotten enough run how bad they are. And I think it should.
Yeah, it has a couple of times, and I'm glad there are some people that are taking notice to it. And again, this is not like fuck them, that's why, let's beat them when they're down. Like,
no,
it's been a long time since a team has just statistically been this bad.
Yeah.
Like, you know, baseball's the one sport where, like, kind of water finds its level. You know, even bad teams are still going to win at least 65 to 70 games typically. Like, the White Sox right now have a chance to be like one of the top 5 worst records in the history of baseball. I mean, it's It's bad.
Mhm.
It's really bad. I mean, that 21 game losing streak was tied for second worst in Major League history. I think the owners of that record did it back in like 1934. Like it's been a hell of a long, and at that time it was plumbers playing baseball, right? Like
Right.
the talent level wasn't the same that it is in today's game. Like it is truly like Darren kind of puts it perfectly. Let's face it, it's really hard to lose 20 plus games in a row in baseball.
Especially when you have an all, and I know they're not pitching him deep into games anymore, but I mean,
With Crochet.
20 games of Crochet is 5 starts. I mean, how did you not win one Crochet start? Like that's wild to me.
And what I think is wild too is like this White Sox team, it's not like this series they got shut out both games. I mean, shit, they made it interesting in game number 1. For fuck's sake, we had 3 games out of the 4 this season end in 7-6 finals with the Cubs winning.
Yeah, and I mean,
all of those games were irrationally close.
In the final game, you needed a Miguel Amaya base hit in the 8th, and they were trailing that game, and for the most part, I mean,
all the way
you look at that.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, they're awful, and I don't know. I feel bad. I actually do feel bad. Like I don't hate them, and I think, like you said earlier, the city's better, baseball in Chicago's better when they're both good, because there is that kind of, we could both talk
juice.
about. Well, not even just that. Like, think of how fun it was to debate during the time of like when Javi Baez was here and Tim Anderson was here, and both fans could go back and say, this guy is better than this guy, and well, this guy is third in MVP voting, and this guy is hitting. It was kind of cool to like have those arguments with your friends and to put together, the joint roster. I see like the Tribune does this like every year where it's like. Let's see, out of both teams, who's the best at their position if we could put one Chicago team together. I don't think you could do that anymore. It would be mostly Cubs minus maybe in center field. Maybe Robert, he's been horrible.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's sad. Maybe it'll get better.
Maybe it will get better. Just to rattle off a couple of the comments here, Juice, as we continue to talk about things. A little bit earlier, to me, the 2 Cubs winning, America is saved. Hey, I get that. I feel that a lot. My dad says number 1 bullpen. The bullpen has been incredibly nice. Scott says 28-15, 650 winning percentage equals 87 wins. Juice, we were doing a little bit of this math before we were. Scott's always on top of it when it comes to math and numbers. To me, what you said, doesn't matter how good or bad or mediocre the Cubs and Sox are doing, the games are always close. It really does feel that way.
It's like the Cardinal games too. I felt like the Cardinal ones are always close too.
Indeed. Darren says here, back in the day, Milwaukee was in Milwaukee for a couple games when Robin Yount got his 3,000th hit. The Brewers fans were unbelievably nice. I cannot say that about the last time I was at that stadium. I thought Miller, or at least the Brewers fans that we sat by, were the biggest assholes that I've ever met in my entire life.
I went 4 years ago. I think I went 4 years ago.
I was there in 2021.
That ballpark sucks when the roof is closed.
It's awful. It's so hot in there because there's no airflow.
Yeah, it's like sitting in a sauna and watching baseball. It's brutal.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not a fan at all. Jay said here the White Sox had a fan injure his leg. He did. Did you see that? He tried to jump over the wall.
I did see that, and then they had to
fracture his ankle.
Yeah, and then they had to cart him off. And I thought the funniest one. I forgot what Cub reporter it was. It's like, I saw them wheel the guy out. We wheeled him right past him. He looks like an IL stint for, which I thought that was. I don't know if it was Jesse Rogers or, and it was funny. I laughed at that one.
Jesse Rogers would say. Scott from Iowa said here, this was in relation to our White Sox discussion, when the most exciting thing at your ballpark is a milkshake. What else is expected?
Which they only sell. I don't know if this is true. They only sell like 78 of those a night because I've
is crazy. Really?
Well, I've heard that like there's like a limit to how many of those cups they have. And when they run out of the cups, it's hard to make the thing in any other cup. I don't know if that's true, but I mean,
that would be the most Jerry Reinsdorf shit I've ever heard in my entire life.
But I don't know. And I also heard that it doesn't taste like campfirey. It's more like just the chocolate shake. I don't know.
It's just sugar.
Well, yeah. I mean,
effectively.
Yeah. I mean, I did say that was a funny joke back and forth. I don't know who was joking, but they should have voted the Campfire Milkshake into the All-Star game. Like for the White Sox, that should be their representative.
The Campfire Milkshake, 100%, because that may have drawn more national attention than anything else. One final comment here regarding the White Sox, Juice, as we continue to talk about things, because despite taking both against the Sox, there's a lot at stake coming up, and I think you and I are going to have some fun, kind of bobbing and weaving through the rabbit hole that is the rest of the schedule and what kind of is at stake and things like that. But Scott says here the White Sox are the Cleveland Indians from Major League, and the owner got her away. Yeah, kind of. Like that's
Very
really
much
what it
so.
feels like here. That's a good one. That's a funny one from Scott, and always appreciate a good laugh. But Juice, like we were talking about, man, this Cubs team, they are a single game below 500. They are still 9 games out in the Central. In fairness, the Cardinals are still 7.5 out of the Brewers in the Central Division, but just 3 games out of the NL wildcard final spot. Cubs have 4-game win streak. That is the second best in baseball at the moment. It's the best in the National League currently. Only the Houston Astros have won more consecutive games as of now. In addition to that, the Cubs are also in the green with their run differential for probably one of the first times all season. They're only a +10 right now, but they are still in the green regardless. Considering the fact that the Cardinals being a game and a half better than the Cubs in the standings are a -48 on their run differential. So something to keep in mind there. But Juice, I mean, really, this is a big 3-game stretch here coming up against the Guardians because, again, probably the best team they're going to see until the Yankees come to town in that first full weekend of September. You have a hell of an opportunity at hand if you're the Cubs. We already heard from Scott with the math. You and I were mathing before the show started. I feel like this Guardians series, Juice, is really the one that, like, if they keep putting together really good play and they can take 2 out of 3, I mean, they did take 2 out of 3 from the Twins, who have more wins than the Cubs do at this point. If they keep that up right now, I think the Guardian series could be the series that kind of takes them to that next step of just going into cruise control for the rest of August because of playing the likes of the Marlins and a Blue Jays team that's kind of down and out right now, just given where they stand in the standings. And they did a little bit of selling at the deadline. You know, teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are still a good ball club, but clearly just have a lot of pitfalls yet. And a Nationals team who is slowly finding themselves kind of falling further and further back in this wild card discussion. They were once they're still within the 8 to 9 game range, but they are the only team outside of 5 games right now out of the wild card that aren't the Colorado Rockies or the Miami Marlins. Just, do you agree that this Guardian series could be the one to kind of push the Cubs into that next kind of cruise control that I think you and I can both sit here and agree they're going to need to get to the number of wins to get into the playoff picture when it's all said and done?
It's funny because we sat on, off air for a little bit talking about the schedule and talking about what was coming up for the Cubs. But I think these games are so important because it almost sets them up in a situation where it's win-win over the course of, the end of the season, and meaning that the last month in September, because we talked a lot about Milwaukee's schedule. And I know that you have 3 games back in your little tag there. I so badly wanted to put 9 games back in mine because I too, given the schedule for Milwaukee, I'm not writing them out of the NL Central either yet, because it seems like Milwaukee's going to play a bunch of games against Arizona. They're going to play a bunch of games against the Dodgers. We talked about, their September has, a lot of teams that are in the wild card hunt. So if the Cubs can take care of business in these next 2 weeks, let's link together that Toronto series, that Guardian series, and then going into I'm blanking on who they play after that. The Tigers, right? Yep. So if they can take care of business these next 2 weeks, it puts them in a win-win situation when Milwaukee is playing whoever they're playing against the wild card ones. If Milwaukee wins, it's like, all right, as long as I win, I'm gaining ground on the wild card. If Milwaukee loses, if I win, I'm gaining ground on the division. Yeah. So the Cubs in these next couple weeks, if they can get to, a watermark maybe of above 4, Maybe you get 4 above 500 after that Tigers series. You can take a look at this schedule and go, all right, maybe the tough schedule down the stretch lets Milwaukee fall back to, these groups. And Scott puts it in great perspective in the comments right now. The Brewers have the 5th hardest schedule remaining in the MLB. The Cubs have the 26th. The Cubs have the opportunity here to, if they could take care of business, get somewhat above 500, that pressure will start to mount a little bit on that division, on the wild card. As more teams jump, closer in this race, and the Cubs have the better schedule, the route becomes easier and easier. But this is the thing. I love talking about the Guardians because the Guardians are a good baseball team. That's not going to be a hard, or it's not going to be an easy, 2 out of 3.
No.
You go to Toronto, and they have a star. They have a guy who is hitting the cover off the ball in Vladito over the course of the last couple months. He's been phenomenal. He can win a series himself by, having just 2 phenomenal games. And yeah, Detroit's not having the best season, but they have a lot of young, fun talent on that team that is playing for positions. I think this is the things that we need to start to realize too. Yeah, it's the 26th ranked schedule, but that 26th ranked schedule also means that it's bottom of the MLB roster pieces that are playing for their career. And there's nothing more motivating than playing for your livelihood and a paycheck. There's just not. I know people will sit and say, oh, I want to win the World Series. No, you want to stay in the MLB. That's 100% what this is. That's the most you could play for is making sure that you get your 10 years like Kyle Hendricks did, and you get your tenure. So I think, there's a path, but they need to do the things that they've done over the course of these last couple of weeks, which is mash the ball around the ballpark, hit for slug, pitch, and that bullpen needs to stay that bullpen. That bullpen's been nails. And I know Hector Neris is nervous Neris, and I hate every time he grabs the ball, but it works out for most, I guess, some of the time. It's not the process, it's the result, But yeah, I think they totally have a chance to definitely come back and make some noise if it's not the wild card or the division. But I think that these next 2 weeks mean that they put themselves in position to capitalize once Milwaukee hits that, win for them. Like it's like I said, if Milwaukee takes games against the wild card, it's good for the Cubs if they keep winning.
Yeah.
If Milwaukee's losing games and the Cubs still win, still great for the Cubs. They're able to catch maybe Milwaukee and put a little bit of pressure on them. Because who knows? Crazier things have happened. I am sure if I looked up, there have been teams that have blown 9-game leads on 8-11-24. Not 8-11-24, but 8-11 of a series in the MLB. I would guarantee you it's happened before.
Could we confidently sit here and say that it happened just a few years ago for the Cubs in 2019?
Well, yeah. We could.
When they pissed it away at the end of the year, and my dad even says here too, right? 1969, the Cubs,
69
down the stretch and blew it away. But again, I think more so to your point, Juice, right? Of what that highlights is it is doable, it is possible. We talk about, and again, I think this is the fun part of the baseball season, in the sense of when it's all said and done, we're gonna go look back and be like, wow, that last month and a half of the season was a freaking roller coaster, right? Like that's what baseball is. And that's why baseball's, in my opinion, one of the more fun sports to go back and take a look at over the course of 162, because it's an entirely different story month to month, quarter to quarter, half to half. You can almost break it down into so many different storylines. And I think that's why people enjoy baseball. Baseball, every single year, baseball is the only sport, in my opinion, where there's enough information and enough occurring that you could literally write a book about every given season for every given team.
Sure.
About just how everything goes. And we've seen a lot of those late chapters where teams piss away leads or teams get really, really hot. Look at the Diamondbacks just of last year. This was the time in the season where they really started to kick it into gear. They got hot. They got their 84 wins. They got in the playoffs. And then got them all the way into the final series of the season, right? I'm right there with you, Juice. I think that's the one thing, right? Like it would be nice for the Cubs to have games against some of these teams that are close with them where you could make up direct ground by just taking care of your own business. But at the same time, it's almost kind of fun just to watch them all kick the shit out of each other from afar and just be like, hey, we keep doing our business and keep winning games. And eventually you guys are all going to sift your way out and we'll just keep climbing at the end of it when it's all said and done. Because, Juice, like you said, I'm not even going to get into the September schedule just yet for Milwaukee. This is just their next 2 weeks of play. 4 with the Dodgers. You are in Wisconsin, but 4 with the Dodgers. 3 with the Guardians after they get done playing the Cubs. An off day on that Monday. And then you have 3 with the Cardinals and 3 with the Athletics. And those are both on the road.
Yeah, that's not an easy trip, too, from St. Louis to out to Oakland.
It is not. So there is a lot at stake yet. Just for Milwaukee in the next 2 weeks. I believe it was Scott said it just a little bit earlier, too. He says the Giants have a series against Atlanta this coming week. He says it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Cubs could be in a playoff spot by this time next week when we're doing a show recapping the Toronto Blue Jay series.
That would be nuts.
It would be nuts.
Can you imagine? This is what just pisses me off, though. All of last year, in last offseason, they talked about, we need to get out to a hot start. We can't do what we did last year because we ran out of gas and Dansby Swanson had to play every single day. And at the end of the season, nobody had anything left. And now it's like, all right, same spot. We have to go and win almost every game from here on out, and everybody needs to be great, and everybody's going to be tired by the time we get to the playoffs. It's like, what? Just take care of business when somebody's ready to hand you a win in May and June, because how many of them were there in May and June where we both pulled our hair out and went, yeah, that's one of those that we're going to hate, to look back on come, September when we're in a fight or, we're looking at the outside in. And that's 100% like all last season. It's like this whole front office looked at each other and said, we can't have what happened last year. We got to get out to a good start. We got to play better in May and June. What happened? They get this year. They couldn't play better in May and June. So it's just like it's almost a carbon copy of last year, which is crazy. I don't know if it's Wrigley Field. I don't know if it's like a May or June thing. They need to find a way to play better in May, because I feel like, and I don't know if this is true, we should go back over the course of the seasons. I can't remember the last time the Cubs played a good May or a good June, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, even what was that? The 2018 season where the Cubs were below 500 at the All-Star break?
Yeah.
And they kicked it into gear late and they got back. So, yeah, I'm right there with you, Juice. I couldn't tell you the last time the Cubs played well outside of the month of April early in the season in quite a while.
And what is wild to me is the fact that they play so well in April in a park that they shouldn't really play well in April.
And maybe that's why they play well in April, right? Because they have a little bit of an upper advantage being used to it, quote unquote, and having the home team. The 2021 Cubs were quite good in May.
Were they? What was the record there? I don't remember.
I don't know. Let me go. Let's do some on the air Googling here. What do you think? 2021 Chicago, a team that I tried so freaking desperately to forget.
Yeah, I mean they
schedule and results. Let's see here.
We were still doing shows.
Yeah, they were 19-8 in the month of May that year.
Yeah,
they were quite good. They were quite good. They were 11-15 in April, 19-8 in May.
That's right.
12-16 in June, but then they were 9-16 in July, and that's what forced the sell-off.
Yeah.
And then they were 7-20 in August, 11-15 in September, but they were 2-1 in the month of October, Juice. They were a winning ball club in the month of October last year.
And why did I hate 2021 so bad? Still trying to remember. See, I've forgotten so much baseball over the course of my life, especially
because they sold everybody off.
Was that the sell-off year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, that was the sell-off year. Yeah, they were great early.
Just so odd, like. Yeah, you know what? I do remember doing a show with you after they did all the sell-off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
Oh yeah. But then the 2022 Cubs. Fun fact: the 2022 Cubs were 15-11 in the month of September.
Fun.
It's a fun little fact. Yeah, the Cubs last year obviously were painfully terrible, but they were 18-9 in the month of August last year, and then they were 12-16 in the month of September, and that's where they got to. So yeah, I'm gonna go down that rabbit hole a little bit later.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna also do that. It's a little homework for myself
It's a little homework.
because
We'll bring that.
I don't know if there's just something with May. It's the dreaded month of May for the Cubs, and we'll talk all about it next year.
Oh yes, we definitely will. Jeremiah says that post trade deadline in 2021 was a fever dream. It really was. It does feel like a fever dream. He said he used to be the biggest Rafael Ortega stan. Oh, I don't know, Jeremiah. Are you big enough Rafael Ortega stan to have a Rafael Ortega jersey? Because I got one of those.
I still can't believe you bought that.
It's chilling at my parents' house. I still have Rafael Ortega in the flesh. Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
That's 2021 for Patrick Wisdom.
Yes, 1,000%, 1,000%. Juice. One thing I do want to touch on a little bit here, besides the fact that anything is possible, because I do want to read through Milwaukee's schedule a little bit, and then I want to read through a final thought that I have, and I want to extend the opportunity to you as well. But Scott brings up a very good point here over the course of the weekend news cycle here. Cade Horton done for the year. Did not get a lot of Cade Horton this season. Again, one of the reasons that I know people were chiming to have him up starting games this year, but I told people, I said, at best, he comes up and he maybe closes games. I said, otherwise, no. A prospect's a prospect till they're not a prospect anymore. Juice, because this is what happens. And unfortunately, the Cubs have had a lot of injuries to their young pitchers.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just look at this season alone. Ben Brown is still on the shelf. Jordan Wicks is still on the shelf. Caleb Killian is just finally starting to work his way back through rehab stints.
Yeah, what is going on with Ben Brown's neck?
Like I have no idea.
That is so oddly weird, and I haven't seen anything about it.
No, there hasn't probably been an update, Juice, if I can remember correctly, since like mid to late July.
Which is troubling.
It is, because at this point, he's done for the season. That's just how I view it. Like, Ben Brown's not
going to take him a bunch of time to ramp up. And
yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's like low-key, like forgotten Cubs stories that some of these guys should be knocking on the door for. If I had a press pass, it'd be like, can you give us
what the hell's going on? Yeah. What's going on with Ben Brown? Yeah, and even Wicks to an extent, right? Because Wicks got back.
He just went to
Iowa?
In Iowa.
Oh, thank God. Okay, good. Yeah, I know they were talking about. There it is. Jay says Wicks began a rehab assignment last night. For anybody that is curious, so for once in the life of Ron Luce, I was completely off the grid yesterday. Like to the point that I did not see Caleb Williams highlights until 10 p.m. And I'll be brutally honest with you, it was one of the most blissful experiences I've ever had in my time.
It's because nice, isn't it?
It was so nice. And because again, and for people that are curious, you see how many shows I'm at here at On Tap. Just naturally, I'm one of those sickos that like puts notifications on for a lot of sports stuff so I can see it pretty real time. So my phone blows up on a regular basis. For reference, for everybody at home, let's see if we can get this here. Just this all right here, that is just since like earlier this afternoon.
Yeah.
And they're like stacked on each other. It's gross.
What if I'm in that same boat?
But I was I was on the lakefront yesterday for the Air and Water Show. And there was just so many people that my phone decided to not have signal for 5 hours. And it was truly blissful. It was very nice. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you.
Dude, so, and like, just to go into, I know we're going to go like just 2 seconds here about just life in general and like how technology is almost, I feel like it's a huge influence on anxiety and depression and things like that.
100%.
It's crazy when you just take like a weekend or like a day to not be on social media like
Mm-hmm.
what happens to your brain, like in your mood levels, and like, dude, the best thing was like over the course of the last couple of weeks, just to like round my story out, why I also have not had a lot of screen time. I've been moving and started a new job, so I'm traveling a little bit more often. So I'm not sitting on my phone. Like I'm the guy who gets on the airplane and likes to sleep. And then
Can do that.
when I'm meeting people at like different, you know, meet and greets and things like that, I'm not on my phone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had next to no screen time, and I felt like I've had just more energy and just had way more. Like maybe that's why I'm actually thinking the Cubs could win the division, because I'm like positive
Juice,
juice.
no sour juice over here today because of the bliss. I'm telling you, it really does help. But it felt great. So I did not see that Wicks began his rehab assignment, but that's great. But nonetheless, my point being at the core of it, right? Like they've had so many injuries to young arms. Like this is why, like when people say, like, "Oh, just trade Tyone and then go sign it," you're gonna have to sign two starters then because there's no guarantee that any of these youngsters are gonna pitch the way that they've pitched this year. If and that's assuming they're healthy, right? There's so many what ifs, and I think that's something. But again, would be nice to see Jordan Wicks down the stretch here. Maybe even if it is coming out of the bullpen a little bit. Like I think a lot of these guys at this point in the season are bullpen guys. You
Yeah,
know what I
no, they
mean?
got to be.
Maybe like because Killian has been down there and actually kind of stretching out. Maybe he's the guy that can spot start for you. God forbid a guy needs to miss a start. But realistically, right? I mean, Wesneski should be coming back soon. He's heading to Arizona to start his rehab. So, like, you'll have a couple of those guys that can fill in.
Yeah, Rachel got that one first. Props to
She
Rachel.
did. Yeah. Big shout out to Rachel W. In the bleachers. She did get that scoop first. She broke that news on X. No credit either. Horrific.
Yeah, right.
She got it from the source. I mean, there's no better way to get it than from the source. And she was all over that one. But I digress, Juice. I think just at the end of the day, right? It sucks that Horton's effectively another half year behind on his development. I think that's the biggest key here, especially because we didn't see him throw more than 4 innings of baseball at any point this year. I unfortunately think this injury now pushes him back more so to like a 2025 or 2026, pardon me, starting rotation option. I think
Which
there's a
may be
chance you
good
see him
though.
next year. Yeah,
Which
and I
may be
agree.
good though. I mean,
Yeah,
right now, who would he replace in the rotation? They're all pitching well.
potentially. Sure, but Hendricks isn't going to probably be back next year.
No, but I mean, they're gonna have money to go out and get like one guy,
Oh,
or
for
they're
sure.
gonna have the opportunity to give Jordan Wicks or Ben Brown another shot. I mean that's 100% what we're looking at going into next year. But I mean, you got 4 good ones, that are going to be underneath control for next year. Nothing to worry about. One guy is just fine. I mean, you're able
Yeah,
to still get that.
100%. And it's a good crop of free agent pitchers too,
Sure.
especially guys in the short term. You get one of these Garrett Cole, Verlander type guys who maybe they take because they're getting older, that 2-year huge money deal, and they're off your books in 2 seasons, and it is what it is. So I'm right there with you, Juice. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I hope that means they'll slow it down with Horton and let him
Yes.
develop at his proper pace and not try to rush him to the show. But it does suck for his sake, right? Like half of your 2024 was spent rehabbing because just unfortunately shit went sideways. So
although you rather have it now than you would when he makes to the big league club. I mean,
agreed.
Best ability is availability. So be hurt now and then come up and be a stud.
Yeah, and be readily available. I totally agree with that. Juice, one last thing here before I want to open it up to you for any final thoughts. We were talking about that Brewers schedule. This is their month of September, folks, for those that are curious. And this doesn't include the 3 home game against San Fran and the 4 and 3 days against the Reds that they have on the road to end the month of August. So coming out with that final game against the Reds, it's 3 against the Cardinals, an off day, 3 against the Rockies, an off day, but then 3 at San Francisco, 3 at Arizona, 3 with the Phillies, 4 with the Diamondbacks, then 3 with the Pirates, and then 3 with the Mets to close out the year. They have a hard month of September. Just going back to what you said, Juice, like I know there's going to be people out there that don't want to drink the Kool-Aid because they don't want to get hurt. But I think if there's a Kool-Aid worth drinking right now, it is that whether it's in the wild card or whether it's in the division, like the Cubs are going to be able to catch people because they're either going to be saying thank you to the Brewers and saying, good job, keep beating all those wild card teams so we can come see you guys in the playoffs. Or, hey, wild card teams, we appreciate it. You're making our job a little bit harder. But all of a sudden now the Brewers are within 3 games and we can catch them in the month of September. So either way, shit can go right. Juice. Final thoughts, my friend, before we look ahead to this Cleveland series and talk a little bit more about it.
No, just keep taking care of business and make this thing fun again. I mean, because honestly, how awesome would the payoff be with what we've suffered through this year and some really shitty losses? Like there's a lot of bad Cub losses this year that I look back at. I'm like, man, like that's brutal. Like, how did they lose that game? If the payoff were a playoff berth, and this is the other part of it too, I think a playoff berth would be so valuable to guys like Justin Steele and PCA and, some of these younger guys, Miguel Amaya, and some of these younger guys who are on the roster, Michael Bush, like just even if they just got into a playoff scenario where they were, win and get in or playing, that opening playoff weekend. Even if they went out and they got beat, let's just say that they're just not as good as these other teams that are in the wild card hunt. You would look and go, all right, they got some valuable experience. It would suck. Yeah, obviously we don't want the Cubs ever to lose, but there's some value to making a playoffs, feeling that run and seeing what that atmosphere is like so that you're prepared when you're ready to go. Because I truly feel like with the way this team has been playing over the course of this last couple of weeks and with the financial flexibility come this offseason and some of these other guys who, maybe they stay a little bit healthier next year, the Cubs have a real legitimate shot to make a nice long run. But I think that it's going to start at building that, momentum going into next year. And there's no bigger momentum than hey, look, we came all the way back. We got into a playoff series despite all of the stuff we went through, and all of us got that experience. So 100% it would be just wonderful to see them just make that run. So just keep taking care of business.
100%. I love everything he had to say there. A couple quick comments here before I share my final thoughts. Scott from Iowa says here, Shota, Assad, and JMO followed up by Steele sets up nicely coming off an off day. Sure does. My dad said, get another Japanese pitcher. Well, that's assuming he gets posted. And I'll be honest with you, Juice. I did a little research and reading. His numbers are considerably down, and he has a huge injury history.
Roki Sasaki?
Yeah, I read my way into being a little bit off the gamble that is Roki Sasaki if he is posted this coming year. More on that at another date. And then Matt Cozy here from good old Locked On Cubs says Cubs could be in a playoff spot 1 week from today. They sure could. Just like Scott from Iowa said a little bit earlier in the show. It's crazy to think, but it really could play out that way as things go. My final thought, Juice. My final thought's going to ruffle some feathers, as we would like to say over at the Four Feathers podcast.
I like it.
This is for all the people that are still so sad that Isaac Paredes is a Cub. Let me explain.
You giving them Morel stats now?
I'm giving them both. Oh, I'm giving them both, baby. I'm giving them both. Because Christopher Morel not only has not played third base at all since becoming Tampa Bay Ray, he's played 5 games at DH for the Rays. He's played the other 5 games, ironically, of all places, at second base.
Yeah, it's not really ironic if you listen to this show.
Well, yeah, it's true, because we always said that that's one of his best positions defensively. He actually has the same fielding percentage almost at second base that he did at third base.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's literally 0.001 better. He was a 946 at third. He's a 947 at second. Obviously, that's a much smaller sample size as well. But he also, Juice, in just, obviously a handful of games, he's only been there for 10 games now, has 11 total bases. He's got the 2 homers that he had in those first 2 days, struck out 11 times. He's walked 6 times. And he's actually got a worse slash line now than he did with the Cubs. And not to say this is going to be forever.
No, are they changing things with his swing?
They might be.
I'd have to go down a rabbit hole on that because sometimes that happens. You get a guy in there like that. You want to implement new changes.
I think we're not going to truly see, like, if the Tampa Bay Rays are putting their developmental spin on Christopher Morel, we're not going to see it until next year at the earliest. Like this stretch down the line here is just for them to continue to tinker with him in actual game action and then give him that plan going into the winter and saying, do this. And this is where you're going to play next year, and this is where we see you. But I want to talk about a guy paying off. Yes, Isaac Paredes is only a 660 OPS player as a Cub right now. That's fine. I'll live with it. But he's got 2 homers, just like Christopher Morel does. He's also got 3 doubles. And he's got 8 runs driven in just 11 games. Sometimes just having that dude that's really good at driving people in, which I think every Cubs fan can sit here and quickly and confidently say that, oh, shit, isn't that something we bitched about all year? Not being able to drive in guys when they're in scoring position? Guess what Isaac Paredes is really good at, Juice? Driving guys in when there's runners in scoring position. And I'll take it, and I love it. And that's absolutely something that we can appreciate here at Cubs on Tap. So, again, I'm not saying that, Christopher Morel is going to be a bust and this, that, and the other and blah, 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 blah. But I will say that for what the Cubs needed right now, at this time, Paredes seems to be the better fit in the lineup for what they need. And I think it's been a very, very good thing. And
that makes the best point. Like every time the ball's hit over there, I'm not like, did he field it? Did he grip the ball right? Did he throw it to first correctly?
Yeah, I don't get pure like stomach ulcers from him playing third base because so far as a Cub, he's actually got a 929 fielding percentage technically so far as a Cub, but for the season he's a 963 guy.
He'll be fine. I'm not worried about him.
There's a little bit of change in coming to a new team, right? So something you always got to keep in mind there.
Scott brings up a question.
It's a good question.
We need to maybe retire the watch parties. They don't win when we do watch parties.
They don't win when we do watch parties. And that's the biggest thing that has scared me away from the watch.
And Ron, you put it into the chat today. We're trying to do a watch party. What was it, Wednesday?
We're talking about maybe doing one this week for the Guardian series, yes.
And I love the watch parties. I love watching Cubs baseball with all you guys. You know what I don't love? The end of the game when we look up and we're like, oh, they lost 8-0.
Yeah. And I was going to say, they don't even get they're not close games either. Like we do watch alongs and it just becomes us doing a show because they get their absolute shit kicked in.
They don't win.
And
that's why I'm sitting here. I'm like, all right, maybe we should not do a watch along this week and see if they win. All right. We should hypothetically, let's sit here and say watch along Wednesday or Thursday, pick a day.
They don't play Thursday. So it'd be Wednesday.
Whatever. Wednesday. It was Tuesday or Wednesday. That's why in the chat. Yeah. So Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll pick a day and said this would have been Cubs on Tap watch day. And if they win, we have to retire them.
I think you're right. Because at least for this season, right? If next year we come out and we do them and they're winning on them, that's different. But we have an awful record this year. We are 1 and whatever. Yeah. It's 1 and 10 or 1-11. It's pretty bad.
And the one win they shouldn't even have had.
No,
they won on the throw
play
home.
At the plate. Yeah, it's brutal. It's rough in these parts. But the other part, Juice, of that question was how many more in person?
Yeah, So I know Tyler's coming into town
the 17th of September. I think
I'm gonna try to. Yeah, I'm gonna try to come in for that. Or not come in, but I'll try to hit that one. I'm also I have a vacation planned in there somewhere or sometime there too. So I'm gonna try to definitely hit at least 1, maybe 2 more for the rest of the year because I think I'm 4-1 in Cubs games this year. I think I'm with the 5, 4-1. So I mean it's a decent record.
I would have to go back and count through my wins and losses, but I have definitely seen more Cubs wins than I have losses this year.
Yeah. Well, they play
We're
better at
definitely
home
above
too.
500. Considerably better at home. Yeah, I'll have to do that math. I don't know what my record is this year at Cubs games, but I can promise you it's above 500. It might be like only 3 games above 500 because I actually went to a considerable amount of games this year, but I think they're like 3 games above 500.
Is that Red Series at the end of the year in Cincinnati?
No, it's at Wrigley.
That's at Wrigley.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
I was
it's
just
at
going to
Wrigley.
say, like, we may have to send Tyler out to Cincinnati if it were in Cincinnati.
Oh yeah, no, not in Cincy. It's at Wrigley. It's at Wrigley. Yeah, to answer that question, I know there are 2 games I will for sure be at the rest of the year. What the athletics game will be one of them when Tyler's in town. Even though don't get used to this background, people. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Um,
got some other stuff going on.
yeah, it Cubs on Tap has had a lot of life updates as a collective group of
And that's the
human
other thing
beings.
too. Like, we did so many shows last year. We've done considerably less, but all of that is because we've had life updates. Like, we've literally had no time to do the and we've done pretty well. I mean, I will say this.
Mhm.
Over the course of the year, like, we've gotten to as many as we can. But I mean, next year will be way easier for me to do shows, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I think it will be for the collective group
Yeah.
as a whole, for sure. But yeah, man, I'll be at that game when Tyler's in town for sure. I will also be at the game pretty much for sure at this point, a week from Tuesday, because that is the first time Javier Baez returns to Wrigley
That's a
since
good
he
one.
left. So I will be at that game. I already had tickets to that game. I technically have tickets to Friday's game. I cannot go to Friday's game, so I will be getting rid of those. And then I have a couple of games in September. I think I have the third against the Pirates. I have a game in that National Series, and then I think I have a game in that Red Series as well. But the Nats and the Reds ones might be those might be goners, just because of life updates, as we said. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Scott from Iowa says schedule the next watch along after they're in a playoff position. Hey, maybe it might have to be what is done. One more comment. Scott says here he thinks Joey has done less Cubs on Tap shows than the White Sox have wins. I think that's true. I mean, in fairness, I believe Cubs on Tap has technically done 40 shows over the course of the season so far, maybe 41, I think. So yeah, I mean, statistically, Joey would have done not much less, but less than wins that they
I
have.
think I'm probably even less.
Yeah.
I mean,
Probably. Yeah, well, that's what happens when we've been doing series recaps instead of the daily recaps. Is just there's
also
less show.
comment in the thing. Like, have you enjoyed less shows, or do you miss us because we're not doing more shows? I'd like to
It's
know.
a good question.
Curious.
It's a good question because we're trying to find ways where it gets to a point in the season where sometimes the recaps of each game are the same show, just regurgitated night after night after night. And so that's why I think some of that forced the change. But yeah, would definitely be intrigued to see how that happens. We got another one here. He says, Darren says, I think an 11-7 would give them the mojo to finish the playoffs. 11 beers and 11 hot dogs by the 7th inning by the Ron, the legend Luce. You guys like testing my waistline. I'm gonna have like a health issue by the end of
Right,
this thing.
dude?
When it's
Like,
all said and done.
and it's always you in the comments that they're throwing challenges at.
I know. Well, because I'm the one dumb enough to do them. That's why.
Yeah, but I mean,
that's the real reason. Let's call it what
and
it is.
don't. I hope the chat doesn't take that as like, oh, Juice, you got to do a challenge. I will not be doing a challenge. I'll tell you that. I'm the oldest guy on this show, so yeah.
You're like, no, I'm not doing these. Not doing these. I feel that. I feel that indeed. Juice, but before we get out of here, buddy, we got to wrap this thing up here real quick. Next up, Cleveland Guardians. What say you? What the hell do the Cubs need to do this week against, again, a very good Guardians team to at least take 2 out of 3 in the mistake by the lake?
You think Cleveland's cool? I never heard anybody say they're going on Cleveland to vacation.
Okay, joking.
I've been booed everywhere. I've been booed. It's okay. I have my friends. Yeah. No, I mean, just play good, solid. That's a good, solid baseball team. Good
That's a good
manager.
point.
Like, fun to watch. I love watching Jose Ramirez. I've said this on this show probably 1,000 times. If there were one baseball player in the entire MLB I could put on the Cubs because I love him that much, it'd be Jose Ramirez. I love watching Jose Ramirez play baseball. I do. But it'd be cool, challenge a little 2016, when you were in Cleveland and just win games in Cleveland because that's what they did. Be nice. How cool would it be if they swept? That'd be really, really cool. We come back here and we're 2 above, and then you're looking at like the Blue Jays and the Tigers. Like, all right, let's go.
Let's go get them. Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Juice. I think if they were to come out of this somehow with a sweep, because then you also have to figure that they would get that 7-game win streak that we've talked about that they needed all freaking season just to right the ship. They're on 4 right now. That would give you 7 heading into 2 consecutive series at home, and not only 2 consecutive series at home, but with an off day built in on top of that.
Yeah.
That is the dream, in my opinion, for this Cubs team. Right?
You know that line from Dumb and Dumber? Just when I think that this team couldn't get any dumber, you go and do a thing like this and totally redeem yourself. That's the Cubs. 100%.
Yeah.
Right now. Just when I think I'm out, they pull me right back in.
I feel that. And Juice on top of that, in the last 10, this is kind of a tale of 2 ball clubs because the Cubs, despite being below 500, 8-2 in their last 10 coming into this series now. Cleveland, despite being as good as they are, 69 wins. Nice. They are on a 2-game winning streak, but they are 3-7 in their last 10. They had a little bit of a rough go at it recently in those standings. And for them, that's huge because now you got the Twins just a couple games back of them and nipping at their heels.
And we are so good against the American League.
We are. The Cubs might as well play in the AL. If the Cubs played in the AL, Juice, they'd be a playoff team.
Which?
I actually, low-key, hold on. I can actually look that up. That actually might be a stat here. That they might be that good against the AL this year.
I think they're like 6-something. They said it on the – it was one of the broadcasts.
Here it is. They are 21-10 this year against the AL.
Yeah, they're like – they're
stupid.
Crazy good.
Yeah, dumb. Literally
11
dumb.
over. 11 over 500 against the
11 over 500 against the AL. And you see a lot of the AL coming up. I don't want to remind people of what the schedule is, but
Yankees, Toronto,
Tigers. You've also got the Athletics at the end of the year. Like, there is quite a few AL teams still left on the calendar here for the
That
Cubs.
series in Oakland, or is that at home?
That is at home.
I've never seen Oakland ever. Like, I've never even – like, I've gone to a decent amount of White Sox games, too. I've never seen the Athletics play baseball.
You know what's really funny about that, Juice? I've seen the Athletics play, but never in the city of Chicago.
Did you go to Oakland?
No, I've seen the Athletics play 3 times, and every time it was in Tampa. Because, like clockwork, they always played the Rays in like late July, early August when my family used to go down there for vacation. And we would always go to like 2 Rays games every year because tickets were easy to get. I have seen the Oakland Athletics a nauseating number of times, and it's always been against the Tampa Bay Rays.
How long is that flight? That team trip's got to suck. Oakland, I mean, I know Seattle would be worse, but I mean,
I've seen Seattle in Tampa as well.
That's got to be brutal. That plane ride's got to suck.
Well, I doubt they probably go directly there. I'm sure they probably build
unless they work their way back. Like that's the first part of the trip, and then they work their way back west.
And they work their way back.
I'm just saying, like that flight would suck.
Oh yeah, that's disgustingly long flight. At that point, you might as well travel international because you probably could get to London from New York in the same time period you could from Oakland to frickin' Tampa.
And you're traveling back in time, like you're losing hours heading that way.
Right.
That's even worse.
Yeah, you're probably leaving Oakland at 9 a.m. and you're getting into Tampa at like 5 p.m.
Also,
or
I don't think
6
I've
in the
said
evening.
this on this show in a long time. Like baseball travel is like the worst sport travel. It's
Yes.
got to be like god awful. I
Well,
mean, I
because
know
you'll
I've
be
talked about like the Cubs' advantage in terms of that being central time and how they don't have to go too far. I know I've went into that on the show, but like imagine like being a base dude, 162 games and all that travel. That would suck.
it's a grind. It's a grind. It's
We have to ask Steele that next time we have
oh
him on next year. We got to ask him about like travel and how much that sucks.
yeah.
That's got to be one of our because we've asked him all like these like layup questions. I feel like now we got to get into like, dude, what do you hate about the season?
About being a baseball player. Like
Yes.
what are the drawbacks of being a baseball player? Like I would love to walk through with him like what do your 5 or your 4 days look like between starts?
Yeah, I think he kind of did that, didn't he? On one of them,
Yeah, but we can get the shovel out. We can dig a little deeper.
I think we could. Like, I want to know, like, if he pitches in Chicago and then they go on a road trip. Like, let's say that they go from Chicago to Miami, and he knows he doesn't have to pitch across the 3 game stretch. Like, what does he do when he gets there? Like, does he go and like explore town, or does he just like hang out?
Does he go and get the most like unhealthy meal you can humanly get like that first day you're there?
Or like, does he like? And I know he's not the type that like goes out, but do some of the guys like go out and like if they know they're not going to play or not going to pitch? I would love to know some of those things
Yeah. No,
because
that's
the
a
thing
fair.
about it, like you're just on the plane going for the series, and you don't. I mean, I know you're doing like your throwing routine, like you're making sure you're on the same schedule, but I mean, you don't have to worry about pitching, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I will say, so just quickly, because I know we've gotten
Yeah, we got
incredibly
to go.
off topic and we gotta shut this thing down here. But I pulled up the athletics schedule from this season, and this was back in April. They played at home against the Cardinals for 3 games. They had an off day, but then they went at Cleveland for 3, at Yankees for 4, and at Orioles for 3 in 10 consecutive days. And then they had to fly home to play the Pirates on that next Monday.
It's like always a West Coast trip for these guys.
Literally.
Can you imagine? Like, oh, that's probably why you don't see a lot of veterans sign like on the West
With
Coast
West Coast teams, unless you're
because
like the Dodgers.
they're like, forget
The
that.
travel.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not
It's a
doing that at
lot
the
of
end of my
travel.
career.
That's why the East Coast teams have such an advantage because your travel is just so much less. I mean, the teams in the middle of the country, in my opinion, got it the best because your worst flight is what 3.5, 4 hours max.
Yeah, I mean, in division too. I mean, we talked about this where the Cubs was like an hour and a half.
If
If
that.
that, it was like an
I
hour.
mean, everybody in the division's a puddle jumper flight away. I
Yeah,
mean, you're really not far from anybody. Here's another great trip for you
for
from the
Oakland.
Athletics. Yeah, from them this year. They played 3 at home on a weekend against the Astros at the end of May. They had a Monday off day. Then they went at Tampa, at Atlanta, had an off day, and then came home for 6 straight games.
What a waste of time.
It's brutal, dude. I'm looking at the schedule right now. Like they've had some gross trips. Like at San Diego's not bad,
No.
obviously. But then like having to go from San Diego to freaking Minneapolis for the Twins,
Yeah, no, thank you.
like the day after is atrocious.
Also, imagine like being a baseball player that plays on the West Coast and the weather is perfect. And then you're like, yeah, who's ready for your April trip to Boston
Yeah.
or your April trip to Chicago? Like that would
Yeah.
suck.
Or
Like
now your April trip to Minneapolis because they don't play in the dome anymore.
Right.
The
That
same way.
would suck. Like,
It'd be
oh
awful.
man. And then like think about it too. Like if it's early in April and you live like on the West Coast, your whole spring training was in somewhere warm. Like you haven't experienced cold temperatures in
No, you really haven't.
a full year.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're 100% right.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Speaking of awful Oakland trips, do you want to talk about the current one really quick before we shut this
Yeah,
thing down?
what are they on?
So they were home for 3 against the Dodgers at the beginning of August, and then home for the White Sox for 3 consecutively. So 6 consecutive games. They had an off day. Then they were at Toronto this weekend.
Hmm.
That flight to Toronto is brutal. But then they have an off day tomorrow.
And then they play 4 in Zimbabwe.
No, they're in New York. They play the Mets for 3. Okay. They're in New York. So you're pretty much the farthest point of the country for 3 games. Then you have an off day on Friday because then you got to fly back to fucking Oakland. But at least you play 10 consecutive games in your own ballpark. They got 3 with the Giants, 3 with the Rays, or 4 with 2 with the Giants, 4 with the Rays, and 3 with the Brewers.
Can you imagine too, like those final week trips out to like the East Coast? If like you're scheduled, you're out of it. You're probably phoning the other team, like, can we just not take the trip up to you?
You know what's actually really funny about that?
What do they play on the East Coast on the season?
No, the Cubs are their last major road trip for the season.
Really?
So they play 9 consecutive games from the 10th of September to the 18th of September, with 3 at Houston. So they take the puddle jumper to Houston, not puddle jumper. It's still a pretty long flight to Houston. Then they come to Chicago for 3 with the Sox and then 3 with the Cubs. That's the way to do it if you're in Chicago. You're in Chicago for 6 days. And then an off day, and then they fly home. 3 with the Yankees, an off day, 3 with the Rangers, and then they go up to Seattle for the last 3 games of the season. So it's not too bad.
I love when Cubs on Tap goes into Oakland Travel on Tap. I absolutely love it.
Oakland Athletics Travel on Tap, because this is what we do at 10 o'clock at night.
I absolutely love it. No, I think that was honestly is one of the better segments me and you have put together in a long time.
What does the Cubs on Tap guys talk about? Oakland Athletics plane travel during the season? What?
Why? If President Tony jumped in now and listened, he'd be like, "What the hell are these 2 idiots?"
Very confused. Yeah, well, it's part of Cubs on Tap, keeping everybody on their toes as they listen to these shows.
That's everybody's homework assignment for the week. You need to find where the Oakland Athletics are and tweet it at me every single day.
Every single day. The Oakland A's are currently flying over Zimbabwe. No, hysterical. Joey Ricotta asks, can Cubs on Tap travel to Wrigley Friday, September 27th? I don't know, Joey. Can we? You can. I will probably not be there that day. I can almost promise you that right now. And Scott jumps in and says, oh, shit, there's a Joey showing.
Joey, that's a little close to your wedding day.
That is a little close to his wedding day. That was my thought. I was like, I thought we were like X-shaying that weekend for that reason. Neither here nor there. Juice, let's shut this thing down, buddy. Over an hour of good discussion here. Cubs get 2 against the White Sox, and they're on a 4-game winning streak. Hopefully they keep that up as they start a 3-game set with the Guardians on Monday in Cleveland. Juice, as always, before we get out of here, I want to remind everybody Cubs on Tap, one of 2 official shows here at the On Tap Sports Network covering your Chicago Cubs. Show our friends over at the Dingers Podcast some love. They should be live tomorrow evening. You can catch them right here on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button. You will know when they go live and all of our other great shows go live. You'll also know when you get to see comments like this from Joey when he says Zimbabwe actually sounds like a great field, because that's just how this thing is going off the rails here. Be sure to follow them at Digger Cubs. Be sure to follow us at Cubbies on Tap. Pardon me. He is at Juice on Tap, Luce on Tap. This guy here in the comments section is at Joey Knows Nothing. But we'll have to talk to Joey off air here, Juice, about some stuff like that.
Yeah, we will. We'll have to I'm in for that. If that's his bachelor party, sign me up. I'll be there.
We could probably make it swing. Be sure to follow all the other boys as well at Teddy Freddy 270, at Nick _ on Tap, at Silent Bob _2, because Bobby Foster is a real OG. Be sure to follow all the really great shows as well. 2 Bears preseason games are in the books. Be sure to be following at Bears on Tap. Be also showing love to the Bulls and Blackhawks groups, because those guys will be getting started probably toward the end of this month. Things will start to kick up as you get into September and training camps begin to open for each of the respective leagues. At Bulls on Tap and at Four Feathers Pod is where you can catch those. And Cubs fans, you guys know the drill. You got friends like the Southsiders, just like we do. Send your friends to our friends over at Sox on Tap. Once again, on tapsportsnet.com, and they can be friends over at Sox on Tap. On tapsportsnet.com, at On Tap Sportsnet, on the socials, the On Tap Sports. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Buddy, Juice, it was good to see you again, man. It was good to talk Cubs baseball with you. Cubs aren't out of it. I think that's the theme of today's show. The Cubs are not out of it after picking up 2 consecutive wins against the Chicago White Sox. Cubs are back in action after a strange Sunday off day. Juice, fun fact, it was the first time since like 1932 that the Cubs didn't play baseball on a Sunday on a scheduled off day.
Yeah.
That's a long time. So it was weird not having some Cubs baseball, but it's great to see them just 3 games back of the wild card, as Joey said in the comments.
And 9 of the division, Joey. We're not giving up on that yet.
We are not giving up on that just yet. Juice, what do you say, buddy? Get out here the only way we know how it comes on tap?
Let's go Cubs.
Indeed. Let's go Cubbies. FTC, I guess FTG, as Jay brings to attention here.
Yeah, there we go.
And let's go Cubbies, baby.